Bienvenidos y bienvenidas. Gracias por venir a este que es nuestro primer meetup de Content Design España en el 2021. Ahora últimamente hay un montón de recursos y un montón de meetups, o sea que os agradecemos que queráis pasar un tiempo con nosotros y nada. Antes de empezar, os aviso, cambio el inglés ahora también un poco por respeto a nuestros invitados que no hablan español, para explicar un par de cositas justo antes de empezar, ¿ok? So now I'm switching over to English, just so we're all on the same page. And first of all, welcome, Annie. Welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you folks.
Oh, thanks for having us, Mario. Really appreciate you inviting us.
Yeah,
and
cool.
hi, everyone. We can't see anybody else. But hi, guys. Hope you're okay.
Let me walk folks a little bit through a few housekeeping details about the call today, and then I'll let you both of you introduce yourself, and then we'll get on cracking. Is that okay?
Sounds
Cool.
good.
Cool. Awesome. So as I was saying, we'll be recording this talk so we can put it up on our YouTube channel, and we can share it across several communities. Basically, what we'll be having is we'll have Annie and Chris come today to give us a talk of the things they've learned over working as UX writers during COVID in a travel company. So it's very specific, but trust me, it's going to be very interesting. It's a fun subject. Well, I wouldn't say fun, but you get what I'm saying. So once we have this talk, at the end, we're going to have some space for Q&A. We have some questions that you've been previously sending, but what I would ask you to do is if you have any questions during the talk, and I'll put it right now in the chat, please do this. Write down question, all caps, and then your question. So that way at the end, it's easier for me to check through the chat and actually grab those questions, okay? And I think that's pretty much it. Also, I want to give a huge thanks, muchas gracias to Dr. Ali and to Sergio, who are sort of like sponsoring this call for today. So thank you so much for your help. And the last but not least, we will be, well, Blanca here, she's going to be helping us with the live tweets from our Content Design España Twitter handle. And if you want to tweet anything about today, I am including the hashtag we'll be using also here on the Zoom chat. So feel free to, if you want to take some pictures or anything that you need, just tweet using that hashtag so we can later on also follow that up. Okay, so that's pretty much, I'll shut up now. It's over to you, Chris. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and let's get on.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Hi. So hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Annie and I'm a senior UX writer at Skyscanner. So whether or not you know us, I'll just do a bit of explanation. So Skyscanner is basically a meta search engine, mostly for flights, but we also do hotels and car hire. And we actually have a Barcelona office as well. Yeah, Chris, do you want to go?
Thanks, Annie. Yeah, absolutely. So hi, guys. I'm Chris. I'm the head of UX copy at Skyscanner. Annie's just obviously introduced what we do as a company. But yeah, we're here today, as Mario mentioned, to talk about kind of what we've learned, I suppose, as UX travelers through the COVID period. Obviously, it's been a tricky time, but we've, with great challenges come great opportunities, I think, for every company, really. So yeah, we just want to talk you through really our journey over the last 12 months or so, and what we've learned and what we're preparing to do kind of going forward, really. So without further ado, Annie, I guess over to yourself.
So I will do the tech check. So give me 2 minutes.
We're doing that. Just to frame the session, I guess, for everybody as well. So Annie's going to be taking you through kind of what we've learnt, and a lot of the work that obviously Annie did herself. So please, Annie, of course, shout about your work. You're more than welcome to. And I'll be kind of chipping in really for most of it around kind of more strategic considerations we've had over the past 12 months, but also what we're looking at going forwards from a content strategy perspective, but also a business strategy perspective as well.
Yeah, so don't worry, we're very much going to frame it in the kind of wider UX content space as well, even though the examples that I'll talk through are quite COVID-y and they are quite specific to travel. Chris is going to kind of talk in a much more broader sense at the end about what that means for the future of UX writing for us as well. Cool, so without further ado, obviously, don't need to set this up too much, but a travel company during COVID, we'll go into that in a bit of detail, but don't worry, I'm not going to dwell too much on 2020 because that would be a bit bleak for everyone. We're going to look at the opportunities that kind of allowed us to have and how it really allowed kind of content and research to come to the forefront and kind of how we're taking those learnings forward. So I'll be talking about, 2020, it's complicated, what we learned from that. And then Chris will be taking you through the road to recovery and then the new world experience design, which is super interesting. Basically just about, not to give too much away, Chris, but the difference between UX and CX writing, which I personally find super topical at the moment. Cool, so without further ado, so this is a bit of a jokey one, a bit of a lighthearted one, but I was the lead writer for all things COVID last year for Skyscanner, and this was pretty much the most common question that we were asked in every meeting. Does anyone have a crystal ball? It was, a turbulent time in the world, and then also things constantly changing in the travel space, and people able to travel, not able to travel, like regulations constantly changing. So I think this kind of sums up the mood quite well. But obviously with kind of challenges come opportunities. So I'll just talk a bit about kind of how that opened up, I guess, a different perspective. So like Skyscanner always consider ourselves a traveller first business. It's like our number one principle. It's what we stand by. It's like super important. It should come before anything else. Sorry about my dog barking in the background. So when COVID happened, obviously that kind of, this value really came into the forefront even more, I think. It was a tough time emotionally for people, and also kind of safety and health were key topics on people's minds. Information was changing daily. It was in the news constantly. And everything, we're a global company at Skyscanner, and every kind of country or nation or region had its own rules and regulations and approaches as well. So it was a lot of, data for people to digest. This meant, as a business for Skyscanner, that our pre-made plans, our roadmaps were kind of thrown aside a bit, I guess. And it was a bit of a no man's land in terms of like what we would work on. So the industry was at a standstill. Obviously, no one was taking flights, no one was flying anywhere. There was no point in kind of dressing that up at all. But I think, again, to lead back to this like kind of traveller first thing, that was almost more of an opportunity for us, especially as UX writers, kind of with the empathy that we have naturally and being much closer to the user, to just think, right, so obviously whether people, obviously some people as well were kind of stuck in different places, and like there was a kind of opportunity for us to help them get back safely and turn that kind of negative experience into a positive. So all the time in every conversation we were having, we were always saying, what can we do for travellers? How can we make this better for them? What information do we have that we can share with them to aid their journey? So as I just talked about, the kind of roadmaps went out the window, which I personally see as like a massive opportunity. It means, you can shape a bit more what you work on and kind of feed in a bit more to the decisions that are made strategically. But there were a few kind of key things that shifted, I guess, in focus. So intelligence, so the priority really for people was to know what was happening and what that meant for them in terms of travel plans. Whereas before we were probably much more focused on kind of inspirational content and like the dream holiday. Now it was like, if I have to travel, what information do I need to do to make that journey as easy as possible? So where before we would have, retention stats and KPIs, now it was much more a brand piece about reassurance and sharing information that helped people kind of make the right decisions. So so transparency was key. Like the information that we do have, we have to share it in a really open and fair way, allow people to make the right decisions and not be kind of pushing them down a transactional route that might not be right for them.
I think, just to jump in, Annie, if you don't mind,
Yeah,
I think a really, really interesting thing for us during the period, certainly as writers, but obviously working for a retail company, however you look at it really in retail, the end result is always going to be driving revenue through customers, and purchases and what have you. Of course, you want to get them to that stage in a very engaging way, but I think, the end result is always revenue, really. And during this time when our revenue streams just dried up really completely, we had to just rethink what it is that we offer customers, what we can offer travelers. Yes, of course, we can still offer flights, hotels, cars, the things that we sell as our bread and butter, really. But it was really about kind of actually meeting traveler needs that didn't drive revenue. It was about how we can keep our customers safe and secure and happy, really. While also as a business recognizing that we're not looking at a long tail purchase funnel anymore. We're looking very much at engagement for the very long term, as and when that travel opens up, basically.
Sorry, jumping ahead a bit there, Chris. Yeah, so absolutely. So, I mean, as Chris just said, in a way, it's kind of music to your ears as UX writers, because you're kind of always plugging think about the traveler user first, and then the retention, the stats, the KPIs will come. So in that sense, I think it was a real opportunity for us to kind of push that point even more. So just to kind of summarize the mood, I guess, when no one knows what the future holds, you need the power to predict how people may feel. So kind of linking back to that crystal ball thing, like we really needed to understand, you know, what people are feeling now, but also what they're going to be feeling towards travel moving forwards, and how that kind of changes as the world is changing. So just to focus a bit more in on the power to predict point. So we've got loads of super smart people at Skyscanner, and we were really kind of honing in on this and looking at how we can harness data that we already had or access to data that we have, or connections within the travel industry, to allow us to understand from a strategic point of view, you know, where we kind of saw the COVID recovery going, I guess, but also to kind of help travelers navigate that data, to help them make decisions about when to travel, or whether to delay, and kind of make those kind of honest decisions, I guess. So one of the really cool things, we've got some super smart data scientists, and they built a custom-built a COVID data modeling tool. Because obviously there was all this kind of really great, or really detailed stats coming out from various government bodies about case numbers, but we kind of needed to think, so what, of all this information and all the stuff that's happening and constantly changing, how do we help users navigate that from like a travel perspective? So an example of that was this kind of prevalence, which I've put on here because it's a very hard thing to remember. This is the data modeling, the data scientist's interpretation, but essentially it's a way that we had of tracking case numbers where we're looking for the past 7 days, which allows us to then look ahead to the future 7 days and just say, look, things are going up, they're going down, or they're stable. That's your information for you to do with as you will, but let that inform your decision as to whether you want to travel to that country or not. So that's just one of the things that we were working on. And then this is just Aurora again, so the same data modeling tool, but just to show that we're updating it now to account for vaccinations as well, because obviously that's a really key part of the COVID recovery in the landscape at the moment. So it's still very much in use, this tool. So to predict how people might feel, so this is like really important for me actually. So research was essential. Obviously Skyscanner, usually we have a lot of traffic and lots of people going through the funnel, and we've historically focused a lot on experimentation and A/B testing, and that's allowed us to grow and scale in such a kind of quick and epic way, I guess. But with kind of no traffic, or less traffic, a lot less traffic on the site, that kind of old approach, I guess, that was more quant-based, was a bit, well, couldn't really be achieved, or we couldn't get statistical significance in the timeframes that we needed to make decisions. So there was a real noticeable shift or pivot towards our amazing research team, who've always been fantastic, but people realized they needed insights, and they realized that actually the only way they were going to get them was by talking to travelers and with qual techniques. So that was a really exciting thing for me, because we sit alongside the researchers, and we also conduct our own research as UX writers at Skyscanner, and just to see the business kind of looking to us for kind of those insights was just a really heartening, to be honest. And it means you can kind of really get to the grips with, you know, how travelers are feeling. We were talking to them daily with like one-on-one interviews, and also surveys on our site, and speaking to people outside of the Skyscanner site as well. And I think the great thing for me about qual research, and why I'm like a big proponent for it personally, is it doesn't, like an A/B test will tell you in a binary sense, does something work, does it not work? But what research does is it really helps you get to the bottom of why something is working, and kind of, I think, make those informed decisions that are super traveller first. So that was definitely an opportunity that came out of COVID from my perspective. Sorry, Chris, were you going to say something?
Yeah, of course, don't mind me jumping in. So yeah, I think another really interesting thing for us working so closely with research was, I suppose, normally if you're doing research, you know, the research you would do would be based on recognizable patterns or recognizable feelings that the customer may be having, or in our case, the traveler may be having. But within certainly the first few months of COVID, no one really knew what the world was about at that time. So no one really knew. Everyone was going through very different emotions at the time, very complicated set of emotions too. And it was really fascinating for us to be able to kind of help predict, kind of what may come in the future through speaking to travelers who really themselves weren't sure what the next day held for them emotionally, or the day after that. So it was a really, really complicated business, I think, really picking out all the details of the very kind of complex emotions that people were going through, and being able to use that, obviously, as writers to create and communicate really, really effective messaging as we went forward. Because it was, certainly for the first maybe 3-6 months of COVID, I don't think any of us really knew what tomorrow would hold, to a certain degree, certainly, in different countries. So yeah, that was incredibly insightful, I think, for us as UX writers, but also for our research team, to be able to just have to adapt and move so quickly with the landscape, as and when that landscape actually built itself emotionally, really.
Yeah, they were absolutely integral, the research team at that time. So invaluable. In fact, that leads nicely onto this this chart that was used a lot. This graph was used a lot last year in 2020. You'll notice there are no dates on this, and it was actually meant to be a projection for like 2020 recovery. So what you're kind of looking at is likeliness to travel, and then these at the bottom are kind of the stages that our research team put together as to how they envisaged, based on sentiment, how they envisaged the travel landscape. So the old normal, so 2019, travel was absolute highest, impacted, when I guess like spring this time last year, when things were starting to come to the forefront, and then the recurrence loop, which is living with the pandemic. Interestingly, we're now at the kind of vaccine cure available stage, and I'd say we're kind of back in the recurrence loop of living with the pandemic, which is why all the stuff we're doing about, we're kind of going to talk you through about how we're helping travellers to feel safe and understand their options and information is even more important, because we're going to be going through like hazy times where things open up and then potentially close back up again, and that's different depending on where you are and where you're going to and all that kind of stuff. So this is a really kind of great, useful thing that came up in a lot of conversations, and this idea of a U recovery, but also this recurrence loop, just to help us understand how to help travellers navigate through these uncertain times. So yeah, the researchers were invaluable. So just to delve a bit deeper then, I guess, into something that actually came off the back of some insights from research. So we were using the research as well to lead what we were building, which is obviously the ideal world and was super cool. So something that came out that was really big for travellers was they wanted to know, where can I go? So this is, if they're planning, so this is kind of moving out of, everyone's back in their kind of resident countries, they're not stuck anywhere, but they are thinking, ahead for the summer, I do want a break. Can I get anywhere? Is it possible? So the main questions they're kind of asking themselves are like, where can I go? Like, which countries am I even able to visit? Will it be safe when I get there, both on my journey and when I get there? And can I get home okay? I don't want to end up stuck there, like you heard quite a lot of people were being stuck during the pandemic. So we've got like 3 key principles that we kind of focused on. So turning confusion into guidance. So where all options are, there's lots of information. Can we pick stuff out to help people understand that a bit better and make relatively quick but informed choices? And turning anxiety into security. So this came up a lot of the research. So people were very anxious about traveling, but there were definitely hesitations, obviously different scales depending on your point of view. Some people were much more open to it than others, but either way, there was definitely like a reassurance and security piece that was really important. So yeah, our job really was to turn that uncertainty into confidence to travel, and I think continuing our job as well to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, Annie. I think a really interesting thing that I kind of felt at the time was our kind of mindset was shifting from actually kind of helping customers create kind of positive emotions to then push them into a holiday, into traveling and into purchasing with us, more into actually kind of alleviating any fears or anxiety that customers had, or negative emotions, I suppose. Normally, as we know, kind of when you're going on holiday and you're kind of getting ready for that, it's a very positive experience. So this time it was obviously a slightly more negative experience for people. They had very different questions to ask. So I thought it was great for us as UX writers to really kind of flip the emotions, I suppose, on their head, and also the questions that travelers were asking. And it was very much our role to really, as I said, to kind of alleviate people's fears, but just calm people down a little bit as well. I think, it was, again, it's very different to the normal world where we'd be talking about, inspiration and excitement. At this time, we were kind of just trying to, create peace, I suppose, within people's minds, rather than this, this kind of more exciting experience, I suppose.
Absolutely. Cool. So just with that in mind, a feature that we released, which we think is pretty cool, was a kind of worldwide COVID map using IATA data. And we came up with this kind of clever color scheme, I guess, which is obviously the green is for open, the orange amber is for partially open, and the red is for closed, which seems all very simple. And we were super happy with this terminology, but then as it turned out, we kind of did some research with users, and what seemed really simple terminology was actually more confusing, because it was not as black and white as that, and actually countries weren't necessarily 100% open. And this map, although it tells you it's quite smart in that it works out, it uses your IP address as to where you're located, and where you're obviously where you're visiting. That might change depending on your own local government restrictions. It still left like a lot of ambiguity and confusion for users. So a big part of our job was kind of listening to users about this and iterating on it. So we then came up with some new phraseology. We spoke to our SEO team, and restrictions, although we had hesitations at first, it seemed like quite a negative word, is actually what a lot of users were searching for. So we just listened to SEO and we kind of went with that. And it also left, it's just more honest as to what the situation is. And that even though a country's open, there still might be some, quarantine when you get there, or things could change as well when you're there. So it feels a bit less like over-promising. So again, like, it just kind of goes to show, I think, how important like the minutiae of like every single little word was at this point, and people really were reading the detail and they wanted to know the information and what it actually meant for them. So yeah, copying came to the forefront, which is great. So just to zoom in a bit, so this is like a country level. To build on that information, we kind of realized that people were really interested in the quarantine question, and they wanted to know, will I have to quarantine when I get there, but also will I have to quarantine when I get back to my home country? So that was really, really important. This new COVID cases this week is actually the Aurora data modeling tool, uses that data that I talked about earlier. So this is our kind of way of articulating that very data heavy like graph in a way that's really easy to understand at a glance. Cases are going down or they're going up. And then if you want to delve into the detail and kind of look at, population size and all that stuff, you can do that. But we've provided the information in the clearest way that we can, and it's up to you to look at the detail if it interests you more. So,
yeah, I think that one's an interesting one, because like the accuracy and honesty of our information was of the utmost importance. And I've kind of said this a couple of times already, but we obviously, as writers, we write for the user, but we're still selling something at the end of the day most of the time. During this period, and certainly with the COVID map and the data that we had, it really was just about being as honest as we can do. We're not trying to use a colloquialism for the UK, pull wool over people's eyes at this point and get them to still travel, even though it was risky. It was very much about every country across the world that we had, data on for our map. It was about giving the most accurate information we could, updated as often as it could be, so that travelers knew and they had confidence in the information we're giving them, but obviously confidence in our brand as well and in our messaging. And I think, it was that honesty and accuracy was just absolutely key to everything we did. We couldn't, we really couldn't put a foot wrong in terms of misleading or even trying to do anything other than just be human ourselves, and acknowledging that we, as travelers ourselves, even though we work for Skyscanner, obviously we travel and we have that mindset too. We would want, we wanted to portray the information we would want to know as well at the same time. So I think, that was super, super kind of important for us at the time, I think.
Absolutely. And a bad experience at the time could be an unsafe experience, and that could have impact on the integrity of our brand and the trust in the long term. So 100%.
Exactly. It's one thing to go on a flight that, in the normal world that has uncomfortable seats or a hotel that's not very nice. It's a very different thing to travel during the COVID landscape. It's much more, emotionally charged, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Annie. I'll take over and give you a break and give you a chance to have a cup of tea, I think, or have a quick drink. We'll do the awkward bit now where I'll talk and you kind of do the slides, and we'll try and do it as kind of seamlessly as possible, really. Sorry, Annie, go for it.
We've got this, totally.
Cool. So, so obviously Annie's talked through kind of what we did during 2020 and also what we've learned. I suppose this side of things is kind of looking actually kind of what we learned and how we're going to progress with it forwards, really. Okay, so yeah, I suppose we've mentioned this already a little bit, but there's a few things that we've certainly learned, you know, as a team. You know, we need to listen more. We need to ask questions often of our users. You know, we understand what people truly need. As I mentioned again, we've taken out any kind of business goals of this. This is purely user needs and user goals at this stage. There's, you know, the content strategy 101 really is that, you know, content bridges the gap between business goals and user needs. Business goals weren't particularly relevant anymore, really. So it's all about the user. Content, not commerce. So yeah, absolutely building trust through the information we had, accuracy and transparency, as I mentioned, and not thinking about commerce and retail at all. And then embodying the user, as I mentioned, like looking at ourselves as humans and what we can do to then build the roadmap kind of going forwards and finding unique ways to help, basically. Over to you for this one, Annie, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So this is my my big hero thing. I'm personally really excited that's come out of COVID for us at Skyscanner. So I think I mentioned that we were very data driven before, and I think what's really exciting is obviously we lent on research a lot last year, but now as traffic is coming back to the site and people's appetite, and there's definitely this huge pent up demand for travel, people are at least dreaming if not booking. We're now that research and the importance of research and what that can give you has been proved by last year, we're kind of now, I guess, a data and insight driven business, which for me is like absolutely key, because I think they're not mutually exclusive. You know, you need like quant and qual data to make proper decisions and move forward. So yeah, that's very exciting from my perspective. Do you want me to do this one, Chris?
Yeah, go for it, Annie. Yeah.
Sure. So actually, this is another thing that's really interesting. So just for everyone's kind of perspective, so Skyscanner, I guess we're quite uniquely positioned in that, although we're a travel company, our main role really is to find the best price from various different brands and airlines. So with that in mind, we're quite uniquely placed to kind of represent the voice of travellers, and also challenge the industry back a bit to kind of increase their standards and do what travellers need from them. So an example of that would be, this is a feature that we released, it's, I guess, called our COVID safety score. And that's this, if you remember, I talked about that kind of, is it safe question that came out of the research. So this is really just about giving people an idea of what it will actually be like on a plane. You know, will people be wearing face masks? Will it be properly cleaned? All the kind of questions that you would naturally have, I think, at the moment. So we developed this this COVID safety score, and you can see we've got all these criteria as to like what exactly that entails, and then depending on what they do, we mark them out of 5 for that. So on our comparison pages, you can look at each flight side by side and look at different airlines and see how well they score, and then delve into like why they're scoring better. So it was quite interesting, because then we had kind of airlines coming to us and saying, oh, actually we do this, and we're pulling all this data straight from here, for example, Air France's site. So then the onus was on them to keep their sites updated and also improve their standards as a response to COVID as well. So I think really traveller first representation there. So this is probably me again, isn't it, Chris? So this is kind of what I was talking about earlier, which is like the roadmaps were open. So I think just like a really key learning, and like encourage everyone to do, is just like there are always opportunities, even in like slightly chaotic times. There's always that can open up new things that you can find, and new ways of working. And just, I guess, I just encourage people to be active about seizing those opportunities. Yeah, and an example of that would be, this was just this time last year actually, when things were kind of came from a very personal story. My brother was stuck in the Philippines, and he was kind of jumping from country to country and booking random flights, paying lots of money, and then not sure if he could get his money back, and then countries were closing as he was trying to leave. So I was just thinking, actually, like there are lots of people who are stuck in different places, or who have to travel just to see family, or for like really, really important reasons. And what they're looking for at the moment actually maybe isn't like the absolute cheapest price, but it is knowing that if they can't take that flight for whatever reason, they're going to get their money back. So it was an idea that kind of came out of a very kind of personal story, and then felt like it had legs, because now obviously travellers still really need flexibility, and they're still asking for flexibility, and lots of airlines have developed specific tickets and policies off the back of that. So just a kind of an example really as to like, I think as copywriters, sometimes we can be a bit passive, and we can get briefs given to us and like not told what we're working on, but like the roadmaps are kind of already in place often. And one thing I really learned from like experience of like working at Skyscanner during COVID was like, you know, we all have really, really good ideas. We're all actually closer to the traveller than lots of other people in the business. And like, I think what COVID allowed us to do was to kind of intercept the roadmaps almost and define what we're working on. But my observation would be that that's what we should be doing anyway. And I'm definitely going to take that away personally and try and do that more in my day-to-day work in the non-COVID sense as well. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, Annie, we can't shout about the one thing that the one product feature initiative, sorry, that you've completely driven, or as it launches. Because unfortunately, Annie's done a great job on a whole new product, but it's not launched yet, so we can't talk about it, unfortunately. But maybe next time we talk to you guys, we can shout about our work even more, our new work.
Top secret, but yeah, to be revealed. Cool. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Annie. Yeah. So obviously we talked about kind of 2020, what we learned. Obviously, from the products and the features that we've launched in the last year, our travelers seem to be very happy with what we can offer them right now. We obviously, as a business and as UX writers, are very happy with what we've done. And now it's really looking forward to like the road to recovery. What's next, basically. Thanks, Annie. So yeah, going to take you through just a few things that we're looking at really going forward. So as certainly here in the UK, things are starting to open up a little bit again. And obviously it's very different around the world, but we want to be able to kind of enable people to be able to travel in any way we can now, really. Obviously it's still very difficult, but people in different countries around the world are starting to feel more inclined to travel, or certainly starting to plan to travel a little bit more, we found. So it's what can we actually do now going forwards to help people still in a very safe and secure way, but help them actually travel. So quick slide. So one of the products we've launched is basically a COVID insurance policy that effectively helps cover people who are still traveling for kind of COVID specific medical purposes and a few other bits and pieces. But this is something we've launched quite recently with our partners Cover Genius. And it's quite a big game changer really in the industry. I think being able to offer this as a very specific policy based on travel. Obviously insurance normally around the world, you have insurance policies that for travel that cover kind of everything and nothing at the same time. But we very much focused on kind of the impact of COVID and what that's had on people, but also then how we can protect them while they're abroad and while they're traveling really.
It's just one more reason to travel, one more point of reassurance, I guess. In the whole bigger picture of a COVID safe trip.
Yeah, and a couple other things really as well before we kind of go on to the next slide is other kind of things we're looking at. So again, here in the UK, domestic travel is becoming a much bigger thing. So we're starting to push kind of our domestic offerings in terms of what we can provide customers. In terms of hotels and car hire is normally the big thing here in the UK. People don't really fly internally, but also abroad, we're looking at what does domestic travel look like to every country around the world. For example, it looks very different to someone who lives in America or in Australia than it would here to the UK. So we can't just create a proposition and a position from our products that's just based here in the UK, where most of our UX writers are. We've got to, obviously look at a very global landscape and the nuances of that and the ever-changing details of what travel is domestically, really.
Yeah, I was actually chatting to one of our PMs based in Barcelona, and he was saying that he's not looking at all to go out of Spain this summer, and like he's got so many great beaches and stuff nearby, and he's going to do smaller trips. So it's definitely different in different regions, but I think for a lot of people, domestic travel will be really big this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Annie. So I guess looking at really the much kind of bigger picture for us as a brand, I suppose we certainly, as I've mentioned already a few times now, kind of obviously we're normally developing new products and new features to help customers book travel. But really, as I said, when your kind of revenue streams and your traffic drops, what do you have after that as a brand, really? So we as a brand are very much looking at our kind of CX and UX experiences to be way more, I suppose, experience driven from a traveler, bearing in mind that, I don't know if you guys know this, but travel has a very long-term planning cycle, I suppose. So at least people start thinking about travel about 28 days, at least 28 days before they actually go to book. So we have a very long lead time there to keep people engaged in our brand, and also to to help them plan and to actually book their travel really. So this time has given us a chance to kind of stop and pause a little bit and really look at what we offer in terms of kind of CX content and UX content, and how we can drive that experience a lot better for our customers, I suppose. Cool. This is a bit of a crazy diagram, but this is essentially a very common pattern for people who are booking travel. So you really have a dreaming stage and a planning stage. If you go to the next slide, Annie, it will show us kind of what travel is right now. Half of the travel industry, or half the travel pattern, has gone basically. So we as a brand have to kind of rethink that purchase journey, or that travel planning journey, and how we can better serve our travelers and our customers across those various touch points in our ecosystem, and really just adapt to how travel is now being looked at online and purchased online as well. And one of the things we're kind of looked at now from a kind of content strategy perspective is really, what is it that we offer travelers, or what is it that we can offer travelers? So a lot of our messaging now really hangs on 3 pillars. So we inspire. This one kind of stands for speaks for itself really, but we give travelers that inspiration to think about travel, to dream about travel, and turn that kind of dream into actual desire to book. We can inform people, which goes very hand in hand with a lot of what we've discussed already this evening, about being there to give the correct information to the user at the right time, to be able to reassure them, to educate them on what the new world of travel will look like and does look like, but also to guide them through the kind of decision-making process. At the moment, that's obviously a bit more complicated than it normally is, but we're looking at it obviously post-COVID as well. How can we better get the customer really from that dreaming stage through to that purchase journey, still as engaged and excited as they were when they were starting to dream of travel really. And then the third pillar is about empowering people. So what tools and products can we as a UX writing team, as a content design team, what can we deliver to customers that adds more value to their journey really? Again, thinking of it not just in the COVID landscape, but really the end to end. I think we've for many years, obviously we've been very product focused, because Skyscanner is, it's a meta search business. It's a product business really, first and foremost. And it's done incredibly well off the back of its traditional way of doing things really. But obviously, as the landscape and the travel industry is changing, we need to rethink of how we can kind of better serve our travelers today, tomorrow, and far into the future really.
This is really exciting for me actually, because I think one of the missing pieces of the puzzle wherever I've worked, actually, when you're working on product stuff, is you often don't know the intent of a user when they're arriving on your product. You don't have that insight. But if you're tracking and check like that end-to-end experience, they've come from social, or you've come from an Instagram post, you kind of already have an insight into their mentality and exposure to the brand already. So yeah, it's just an exciting new way to work for me.
Thanks, Annie. Everyone loves a line diagram in a presentation. So this really is just showing you our very complicated communications and content ecosystem that we have. It really is quite complicated. And like we mentioned, the journey a traveler goes through is a very long one, a very complicated one when the customer's just booking travel anyway. So we're really, it goes hand in hand with what Annie I've just said really, but we're really looking at our messaging and our content from a completely holistic level, from a brand perspective, in terms of our CX, of how we can better serve our travelers through every single touch point of their journey, of which I forget the number off the top of my head now, but it's something crazy, like when you're booking travel, you look at 150 different things, before you actually purchase. And it's now about how can we be there at each one of those 150 steps that people go through. And it's huge piece of work, but the opportunities there for us as a brand and us as a team as well as writers, I think is huge. To look at content and communications so strategically and from such a big, kind of zoomed out lens, I think is great for us, as geeky writers, I think as well. And then moving on to the kind of, I suppose, the UX side of what we're rethinking really. Obviously mentioned very much for kind of brand messaging and brand content, but really looking at how we as UX writers can serve that, I suppose, to our travelers very much at the end or closer to the end of their journey, and how we can really dial up the the enjoyment of traveling. You know, we still all want to go on holiday. We just necessarily can't at the moment. But it's about how we can get people inspired again, even if they're not necessarily planning on going somewhere. And one of the ways we're doing it really is really focusing again on driving the why, what, and where of you would travel, of why people would travel, rather than the how. Like we as a business, again, essentially what we offer is flights, cars, car hire, and hotels. You know, hotel bookings. So we're a booking engine really, but it's that previous steps or previous mindsets that a traveler goes through that we're really looking into a lot more now, and being much more experience led, I think, as a brand. So if you always put your kind of yourself into the mindset of how you would plan travel, you always want to find a reason to go somewhere before you would even book it. You'd want to know about the culture, the food, the events you could go to, the experiences you could have within that place, whether it's in Europe or much further abroad. You know, that's what gets you interested in a destination, much more so than thinking kind of destination first, really, I think. So we're really trying to dial up that kind of experience and the kind of emotional side of what we can offer going forward. So just on screen, just a few screenshots of what we're looking at really as a business. It's a very kind of English thing, and I don't think this will translate particularly well, but a very marketing thing. The term is you sell the sizzle, not the sausage. And the sizzle is basically, it's the dream, it's the inspiration, it's the emotional elements to what your company offers, and the sausage is the core products really. So yeah, we're looking at it from a much more kind of experience driven way really, I suppose. So, and again, on screen you've got here, looking at food in Malaysia, looking at kind of road trip experiences across Switzerland, very peaceful, kind of what's the word I'm looking for, kind of, I suppose, spiritual holidays if people are interested in, or the other end of that is a very adventure driven holiday. So that's kind of one thing we're looking at, and if you don't mind moving on please, Annie, that'd be great. The next thing is very much how we can kind of really curate content for our travelers a lot more, and it's a bad choice of words, but enabling the user to actually build their own travel experience with us a bit better than they currently can. So one of our ideas is really getting the kind of a two-way conversation going with our travelers and asking them to basically tell us what they want really first, so we can help them build their complete 360-degree travel plan. So for example, people are often looking for city breaks, but you might want to go to the Amazon jungle for a really crazy holiday, or you might want to go to a beach holiday, or kind of a mountain range, the Alps, something along those lines. So it's about asking our customers what their drivers are to travel, but then also us as a company and as writers really complementing what our users want and need with content, not just kind of micro copy, but full end-to-end content of how we can just keep people engaged and just dreaming about that holiday for however long it takes really.
Yeah, it's a nice product to work on, because I mean, with travel in the normal sense of the word, it's creating memories, isn't it? It's creating kind of things that you'll talk about as you get older, and it's like there's definitely a high emotional intent to it. So unpacking it in this way and kind of getting straight to the heart of that emotional intent makes so much sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think one thing we actually haven't got a slide for would be, just spark my memory really, Annie, is what we're doing, or what we're kind of looking at to help travelers post booking as well. So we're looking at kind of features around I suppose, again, building a two-way conversation with our customers, but for them to let us know how their holiday was, how their hotel was, what their flight was like, how their experiences were, so we can help them again by kind of learning from kind of user insight that's fed back to us directly, how we can help them plan their next holiday. Because data and research in the industry shows that people, I think, are starting to think of their next holiday within 7 days of coming back from one, because you're still very, kind of energetic about coming back from a holiday normally. So again, it's looking at what can we do to better improve our service for our travelers, kind of not just before they book, but also during, while they're away. What can we do to help them find a great restaurant, for example, or find a great place to visit in their destination. But also afterwards, when people are back from their holiday, it's about what can we do to then help you and service you kind of going forwards, really. Cool. And this is just another really kind of screenshot-y example of what we're kind of looking at in terms of that kind of conversational and experience-led experience, I suppose. Again, giving travelers every opportunity to really build their holiday. Like previously, we've seen kind of groups of holiday type. Here, we're looking at very much like getting people to look at you know, the continent they would like, or the country they would like to go to, and us being able to serve some really rich content around Asia, obviously, which is the screenshot here, but yeah, various destinations, even if they're not specific cities at this point in a customer's decision-making process. You know, we should be able to give people all the information they need to really narrow down their choices, having found out everything they want to kind of find out about travel, but also about that specific destination or the dates they're looking to travel. And yeah, really helping the traveler just find out everything you would want to know if you're going to visit a country or a city in the world. Like what details do you want to know that will inspire you, but also that will persuade you to book as well, really. So lots of things in the pipeline really in this regard. Yeah, I think, like, as I mentioned previously, the COVID itself has obviously given us chances as a business to really kind of pause what we do traditionally and really rethink, you know, travel industry as a whole, because yeah, you know, who knows what the future holds really for travel, but certainly at the moment, travel isn't a big thing really for anybody. The demand is there for sure, but obviously we can't necessarily go anywhere. So it's about, again, looking from a commercial perspective, how can we meet that demand as and when it comes back up, but also how can we differentiate ourselves from our many competitors within the industry who obviously, you know, are looking to do similar things to us, really. So yeah, it's very much focused on, you know, giving the user a much better service, but obviously from a commercial perspective, that hopefully has a very big knock-on effect for us too. Cool, thanks, Annie. And that's the end of our presentation. This is a really cheesy slide we whacked in at the end. I don't know if everyone gets the reference or not. If you haven't seen the film, don't bother, it's terrible. But yeah, we're done basically, Mario. So that's us for now, I think.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. It's mind blowing, all the stuff that you can do from like a content first perspective. So thank you so much for coming and showing us and sharing as much as you can. So, I mean, and it's interesting, right? Because this is what we're speaking about at the beginning. We've got people from Argentina, we got people from Ireland, we got people from several cities in here, we got people from Portugal. So we got people from all over the place coming here to listen, like how you're taking everything that you've learned as a UX writer and applied it here to this very particular, and we're calling it emotional product. So I have a couple of questions here. I know we have like 10 minutes. We might go over 5 if that's okay with you. So let's do it this way. If you want to voice your question, feel free to jump in the mic and ask Annie or Chris, or if you want to write it down, I can read it for you. So does anybody have the first question? Okay, so I'll pick it up. No. I have questions that I've gotten before, so it's always hard to do the first question. So I'll do the first question. Okay, so this one is very interesting. Like, how or what do you think was the biggest win you guys got from being able to react so quickly to so much change in so little time?
I guess first of all, Annie, do you want to go for this or shall I?
Well, it's a personal win for me would be the stuff I was talking about when we have the opportunity to kind of shape what we work on as well. That for me is like what's really exciting is kind of when you're creating your own problem space as a UX writer. Yeah, personally. And I also obviously think that has like massive benefits for the company as well. And yeah.
I think from my side of things, it was being able to like really get unbelievably close to the user. I think, you know, we you know, we do research, we find data, all this kind of stuff, you know, we're close to the users as a UX team anyway, but this like drove that, I think, to another level, really. You know, I think this gave us the opportunity to really almost in a way get to know people that we might have interviewed individually to a certain degree, because again, like any kind of barrier of, you know, company versus person was always just smashed, because, you know, we were talking about a very emotive subject and a very emotive thing. And I think, yeah, being able to really understand individual users, but obviously then being able to develop kind of trends and patterns out of that was, yeah, fascinating, especially again in the landscape of a world where we ourselves didn't really know what was going to happen the day after either. So it was, yeah, unbelievably complicated, but, you know, hugely insightful to speak to people on such a emotional level, I guess.
That's amazing. That's how, actually it ties in really nicely to the next question, which is they're asking us here is like, you've been doing this, like I'm translating from Spanish to English, so I'll do it as best I can. So this has been pretty much for you folks, like you were saying, a very huge empathy exercise, right? So the question here is, how did you turn this into an opportunity to start creating content design? Designs from a content first perspective.
Yeah, good question. I suppose this really just drove home the need for messaging and clarity in messaging. You know, I think there's no other way to communicate this kind of material other than in words, quite frankly. You know, there's, you know, obviously we as humans, you know, we communicate, you know, using words and speech predominantly anyway, but you know, art can't, and you know, creative direction and art direction can't show you whether or not you should travel. That's purely words on a page. So I think just having to shift into a, you know, a content first and a copy first mindset, I think was the huge kind of opportunity for us, you know, because it enabled our team a lot more to think and to drive initiatives and drive copying content as a discipline, I suppose. But yeah, I think it really was a case of there was no other option, I suppose. It had to be messaging. It had to be, really.
Anything to add on that one, Annie?
Oh no, I would totally agree. I mean, we were almost in the hot seat almost with messaging, but like in a good way, because it made everyone realize kind of how important the detail was, and the fact, because you always hear that age-old adage that designers say, you know, people like users don't read. And the truth is, like, they do read, they just read, they don't want to read loads of text, but like the text that is there really, really matters. So yeah, it kind of just highlighted that, I think, across the whole business.
I think, sorry, Mary, if I can jump in.
Go for it. Yeah, of course.
I think as well, what it really showed the value of UX writing, and I think everyone in this school probably does this on a daily basis, but we take such complicated information and then distill it into 5 words. Like that's the life of a UX writer, really, isn't it? And I think this project especially really showed ourselves and the rest of the business what it is that the value we offer, you know, as writers and as kind of content first people. I think possibly more than ever before, really, because yes, you know, you have very complicated information that's obviously portrayed through, you know, art and text, which complements each other. But at this point in time, it's, you know, we have to do all the heavy lifting and the work really through our copy and our content, especially within kind of predefined UI within some areas of our website, when we literally only have 5 words to play with. How do you get across such a complicated and emotive thing in 5 words or less? It was I think it's really kind of shone a light on copying content in Skyscanner and just how valuable it is really going forward, I think.
Yeah, that's brilliant, and it's actually a game changer, like you folks were describing. So I have a couple more questions, and if anybody wants to jump in or write them down on the chat, please feel free. So we can ask Annie and Chris. So tackling on about this conversation about like the importance of those individual words, there's a question here about like the actual wording that you had to use for the map and how that seemed to be very important. So could you tell us a little bit more about the process, and how was there any sort of like struggle to make sure that you could be precise at the level of each and every single word? Yeah,
that's a really, really good question. So we were kind of balancing obviously the data had to come originally from the IATA source, and that wasn't so well written a lot of the time, and it was like a huge paragraph and not even properly formatted. And what we could control was the labels that I showed, the low restrictions, major restrictions, and the little blurb underneath. But yeah, I mean, the process actually involved so many more people from across the business than I would normally work with. So for example, PR were really involved in that. And SEO, as I mentioned, we kind of lent a lot on our SEO colleagues for insight really as to like how users, the words that they were using, how they were talking, and to reflect that back to them. But yeah, it wasn't easy because as Chris was saying, like there was so much information, and we kind of had to, we didn't want to lead with, we wanted to present it in a neutral way. But at the same time, we had to help aid users to understand it at a glance and to be able to continue on with their journey and not be distracted. So it was a real challenge, but and we were iterating all the time. We were listening all the time to change it, and being really open to being wrong as well about it.
That's brilliant. It's actually very mind-blowing, the fact that you have to like take into account every single word that goes in there, because there's so much in play. I mean, from everything from like obviously a brand perspective, but also from like a legal perspective and like countries, and every country had the same thing. Just for disclosure, because I'm not sure everybody is familiar with, can you explain what the source is IATA?
Yeah, sure. So it's I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but basically it's International Association of Travel something, and it's kind of a neutral data source, so a bit like WHO, but for pure travel. But yeah, so they kind of were collating all of the different country restriction information, because it was very like there was a lot of exceptions. So it might be like this is open to most countries except for these countries. So there was no way that we could have and there was no point really in us trying to do that data ourselves when someone was already collecting it. But it was our job really to turn that into like a user-friendly, like understandable piece of information that you can actually do something with, whilst also not making too many claims. And because, you know, people were making decisions about whether to travel based on the information that we're recommending. So really, really important that it's, like we're saying, transparent and clear and honest, and allowing people to make their own decisions in an informed way.
And I mean, what I find super interesting is like you're taking huge amount of data sets and creating a system that's actually scalable. So it didn't matter what country, you could shift the country, you could shift the way back or way in. But then when you start adding all the variables of the quarantine coming or the quarantine going back and making all of that data sets into something that's like human centered, that's just tip of the hat to you folks. That's amazing.
That was changing and still is changing constantly, right? Like countries are opening, closing up, and different countries are opening corridors. It'll be the same this summer. It'll be constantly like where I can go personally from the UK will change week by week. So it had to be an API, but it was just that balance of like adding a human element to it as well.
That's brilliant. I got two more to go. So the question is, what was the most interesting learning from working this close with the research team?
Interesting one. They're people. Maybe, you know, sometimes you work with developers and researchers, and these people, you don't realize that they're people sometimes, rather than just, you know, people that do numbers, I suppose. So, but I think, all jokes aside, I think like it's just so good to realize that these people, even though they have a different kind of mindset to you, they think more in obviously data and stats and numbers to a certain degree, but the way that they convey like or creatively solve the problem is very similar to how we would do it. Obviously not exactly the same, because I think naturally we as writers we would always think like, you know, let's write first and think later, or possibly wrong choice of words, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, you know, a researcher would look at a problem possibly from a very human angle, data driven, yes, but very human. Whereas I think we probably, as writers or myself personally, would look at it more from like a messaging angle first, rather than like actually what am I looking to, or how am I looking to engage with my user to a certain degree, or my, you know, my customer. So I think that's the big thing for me, is like working out that actually you've possibly come to the same conclusion, you know, to solve a problem, but have very different ways of coming about it. But that only just enables a better solution, final solution, really. I think, you know, it's a case of really looking at basically how just different people bring different skill sets to the table, I think is it. And being able to sit so closely with them, you see that their methodology is different to yours, but it has exactly the same final effect, really.
Their aims are the same, right? They're like our closest allies above maybe designers, in a way that they're so user first. But you're right, Chris, they approach it in like almost a step before the way we might approach it as a UX writer, and they help us challenge assumptions. And for me, like, I mean, our UX research team act as a kind of like enabler almost, like they empower us to run our own research and do our own insights, because there's only, you know, a handful of them, a bit like with the UX writer where you're serving lots of different people. It's kind of similar. So in many ways they have to kind of set us up and enable us to run our own tests, and that is like such a valuable skill. And it just means you can validate your assumptions so much more. And when it comes to, you know, being challenged, you've got rationale, and you know it's user first. It's not just your instincts. And, you know, sometimes you're proved right and sometimes you're proved wrong, and like both situations are great as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
I think that's a great piece of insight. In the end, is like you have to find all the allies that you can within your product team, because especially when you come from like a content design or UX writing background, we tend to be like an afterthought. So the more allies that you can do and that speak the same language, even if the approach is different, that's super valuable. Great. So I think that's all the time we have today, folks. I mean, well, I think we'll send you more questions if we have over. And it was so great to have you. It was so good to see you folks again. Anything else that you would like to add before I let you go?
Awesome. Well, thanks for having us, Mario. First and foremost, I think, thanks for inviting us. Thanks for letting us talk. I hope everyone on the call found it interesting. If you want to, hit us up on LinkedIn or whatever, have a chat and just connect, then please do. Otherwise, yeah, all the best in your careers and in your job. And, despite the good fight as UX writers and content designers, I think, the more people involved and the more unified front we can have, the more influence we'll have over the industry and our careers kind of going forward, really.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us and for listening to us, and like really excited to be part of this community moving forward. Excited for the next one.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for all your time, and thank you so much for coming, folks. And we'll see you on the next time. That was it. And as soon as we have the video available, we'll make sure to share it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Bye bye. Gracias a todas. Hasta luego.